So good evening, Tewksbury. It is Thursday, November 19th, 2020, and the time is 6:01 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting of the Tewksbury Board of Health to order. We got a bit of a lengthy agenda tonight, so first item on the business is approval of minutes. And actually, I forgot, before we do that, since we are virtual, I'd like to take a virtual roll call. So Chair Ray Barry is on. Charlie?
Charlie Rue is here.
Okay.
Maria
Tony?
Zaroulis is here. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Maria Zaroulis is here.
Tony Bichetti is here.
Okay. And then from the health department?
Susan Sawyer, Health Director.
Okay. And Susan, Ron has the dial-in info for tonight?
Yes, he does.
Okay. So coming back to the agenda, we have first on business is approval of minutes. We actually have two sets of minutes, both from our normal monthly meeting that was held on October 15th, but then we also have the minutes for the special meeting that we held on November 5th. So both of those have been submitted to you, and I and the clerk, Maria, have reviewed them. So does anyone have any questions or comments on, we'll start with the October 15th meeting minutes first.
I have none, Ray.
Okay. Any comments or questions, Tony, in the October meeting minutes?
Yeah, Tony may be in a spot. I'm okay with those, folks. I'm sorry.
Okay. And then-
I'm okay with the meeting from October.
Okay, and then moving on to the special meeting minutes from our November 5th meeting. Any questions or comments on those?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I'm good, Ray.
Sorry, Joe, you said you were fine with them?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if someone would like to make a motion to approve both meeting minutes as submitted, I would,
I will make a motion to submit October 15th and November 5th meeting minutes.
okay. Someone like to second that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. So Tony seconded it. So motion's been put forth and seconded to approve the minutes for the October 15th, 2020 meeting and the November 5th, 2020 special meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and we'll take a verbal roll call. So Maria Zaroulis,
Aye.
Charlie Rue,
Aye.
Dr. Bichetti,
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well, so it carries unanimously 4-0. Okay. And how are we doing getting Maria on the call?
I'm here.
No, the other
Oh,
Maria.
the other Maria. Oh, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I just spoke with her and she was having some issues, but she believes she'll be in soon. If
Okay.
not, she does have the call-in information.
Okay. So let's just like her to be part of this. Let's just take the slightly out of order and let's handle Lisa's Pizza next, because that should be just a quick item, and then hopefully.
Are you sure?
Right.
Are you sure? You want to do that? I don't know. Check if you can, sure. But Chief is here, so we want to.
Yeah.
Time is precious.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
up to-
actually, yeah, we'll keep it going. The agenda. Okay. So, welcome, Chief. So I guess we'll have at least you starting up, and then Maria can join in when she connects in.
Yeah.
We just wanted to have sort of a chance to meet and greet with you and to sort of hear what your thoughts are about what efforts you see sort of having the police department involved in as it pertains to substance abuse and prevention, as well as mental health issues. Because I know there've been some a lot of ongoing programs that were under Chief Sheehan, and just I think for the board, we're curious just to know what your viewpoint is on moving things forward. Are you planning on sort of keeping things as they are? Do you have changes in mind? And I guess since we're trying to work cooperatively with your department of the things that you see that we could help you with, or Maria Zaroulis is also one of the board members of Tewksbury Cares that
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah. Well, thank you.
overall picture.
First of all, nice to meet all of you. This is summer meeting in 2020 now, virtually. Look forward to a time when we can all sit down and talk. But what Chief Sheehan built here and what he did is amazing. And I feel as though we've become the model, and we're going to continue to build. We have some excellent programs that we're working on, continuing with some of these grant programs through substance use disorders and mental health. These are very important issues to all of us at TPD. We have sort of, over the years, and we'll continue to do it, we've changed our approach. You know, policing used to be sort of a Band-Aid on every call and go to the next one, deal with that individual and go to the next one. Now it's about, you know, what are the underlying issues? What can we help you with? What services can we provide for you, whether it's mental health or substance use or homelessness, or housing or food or clothing. And I'll tell you, we're doing some amazing work. We call it the Frontline Initiative now. We're a mental health collaborative with some other communities. We have mental health clinicians. We're getting, you know, peer counseling and peer coaches. Bria can speak to a lot of the things that she's doing as far as meetings. And, you know, we're adapting to the virtual world. We're adapting to our resources. We certainly know that this is a difficult time for a lot of people right now. Not just people that suffer from substance use disorders, mental health. Mental health is, you know, a big issue right now for everybody. You know, in this time with COVID and the election and differences and social media and all kinds of things that are going on. So we want to be here for everybody. Our officers do a great job taking the time with people, and our team follows up. And we're going to continue to do that. We're submitting some grants that Maria could speak to a little bit about. We're training our officers too. Like, that's important. You know, we're getting the level of training for mental health first aid and dealing with people with mental health issues and substance use issues and implicit bias and de-escalation. All of these things that you may have heard, you know, throughout the country as buzzwords. We want to be sort of a model agency in policing. We want to continue to build our partnership with all of you, the community, be there for everybody. And, you know, one of the things that's important to me, and I know it's important to everybody in this organization, is that we treat people with dignity and respect. No matter where you come from, no matter what your issues are, no matter what your status is or your class is, we treat everybody with dignity and respect. It's really simple. It's about treating people the way that you would want to be treated. And that's the way that I was raised. And I know people feel the same way. We're not without human error. I can tell you that in this profession. But we will be on top of things. We will make sure that we're providing the best service that we can. And we'll continue to run these programs out and help people and develop these programs. Some of the work that our clinicians are doing is phenomenal. We're helping people. Not everybody accepts the help, but we're still, at least when we reach out to them and follow up, they know maybe someday down the road that we're here for them. And we're here for them in a lot of capacities, whether it's domestic violence follow-up, family issues, elder issues, juvenile matters, mental health issues, obviously, and substance use disorders.
Well, thank you for that. Definitely, things have definitely changed over just the past 10 years of what police departments are now responsible for. So I'm glad to hear that you're sort of keeping everything that Chief Sheehan had gotten set up and then expanding that. So
yeah,
we're glad to hear that.
We're going to build off of that. And another passion of mine as well is, you know, the wellness and health of the officers. You know, we're in a critical time right now where we understand that this profession, you know, can do certain things to us in our health and wellness. Things that we see you know, the deaths, the bad things, you know, and what we're learning now is that, you know, officers can face, you know, this cumulative PTSD. It doesn't have to be one particular incident, and we're really going to focus on that. We're going to focus on, you know, we formed a wellness committee within the department. We really want to focus on, you know, fitness and education of fitness and mental health, and well-being, and diet, nutrition, and sleep, and those things, because that all plays into how we are able to do the best for our community. If we're in rough shape, we're not going to be able to provide the best service we can to the community. So we got to work on that inside out. But it's all around. It's something I'm passionate about. And we have some great people like Maria doing some fantastic work. We're lucky to have her.
No, and as an EMT for 25 years and knowing that there's a huge issue with PSTD in the EMS world, I know it's also the same in police and fire services, and it's now starting to get its proper recognition. So I'm very glad to hear that you're trying to help your fellow officers along those lines.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, I know that you guys have a packed agenda and Maria's going to talk, but do you have any other questions for me? Anything maybe I didn't cover that you'd like to know? Or I'm certainly can make myself to avail myself to anybody individually at any time. So.
No, I'll open up to the board members, but I think that was a very good introduction, so thank you.
Yes,
Any of the
thank
board
you,
members
Chief.
have questions?
No, thank you. We appreciate the chief coming down to speak with us. Hopefully we'll get to meet him in person someday.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you
I hope to
very
meet
much,
him in
Chief.
person
Stay
in the
safe.
right way. Vice Chair, I echo Mr. Bichetti's sentiments.
Thank you.
Brian, good luck. This is Charlie Rue. Anything we can do on this end, you got our phone numbers.
Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it.
Well, Maria, I guess the floor is now yours.
Well, hi everyone. I apologize for being late. I'm not, my WebEx for whatever reason wasn't connecting. But thank you, Chief. I'm really proud to work for you. I'm very impressed with how it's been going, and I appreciate it. I wanted to let everybody know that about an hour and a half ago, we hit send for this new state grant. It's going to be renewing what we're doing and with the other communities. We're really a lot of work. It's really tying mental health and trauma and different approaches to prevention into it. I want to believe that BSAS heard us when we said that mental health and substance abuse go hand in hand, and because they've done a really great job with the RFR. So we should hopefully know about that soon. Everything we have done has been moved to social media. I have a Facebook page, and I also post a lot on Tewksbury Cares. I reported it out, and we're really getting quite a bit of hits on both Tewksbury Cares and it's the new PPNM coalition. And last days, because we were working so deep on the grant, I haven't posted as much, but I'll make up for that over the next few days. And it's going well, but everything is social media. I am happy to say that I am working again with the SAD students, some of the same ones that we saw last year. And even those youth, you could tell that they're struggling. They're having a hard time engaging. They show up, we talk, but it's not the same. So, Andy Balestri and I are working on trying to figure out how we're going to be able to get them a little bit more engaged this way. They came up with a great idea. They wanted to do it, and I apologize, I can't remember the name of it, but kind of a support group type of thing on a new platform that I've never heard of. For teens that are struggling the way they are, that's not relevant to the school, it's not related to the school, and just to kind of have a support group to get together. So I'm excited about that. But you know some of the teens we worked with last year, they're even dragging their feet. So I'll keep more on that. And for the unseeable future, we're just planning everything to go virtual. December 7th, we're having, it'll be our third annual Substance Use and Disorder Symposium. That's with the group, it's called PPNM. We're now the Prevention Professionals of Northern Middlesex. I think I might have mentioned this the last time, but we did that so that in the event that SAPSI and the prevention and the opiate grant does go away, the group of people still exists, so that we don't, it just doesn't, everything we've done over the past period of time with all the communities doesn't stop. So we're going to keep that name even if we get the grants renewed, and kind of try to expand it as well. So that's what I have. And again, thank you, Chief. I appreciate the kind words and working for you.
So Maria, I have a question for you. Unfortunately, with COVID causing us to have to fall back to remote sessions, and October was Substance Abuse and Prevention Month, and typically in a normal non-COVID year, there would be a lot of different events at the high school, at the library, and elsewhere. If you give us just a quick overview of what was able to be held last month, where we couldn't do things in person.
Absolutely. So we did everything regionally, especially because it was going to be remote. We figured instead of having 7 or 8 different things, so we had our regional vigil, and that was in Wilmington this year. It was very small. I think it's actually the only event that we've gone face to face, and we just felt the vigil we had to. We were able to invite 5 people, and 2 of my choice was 2 of our Tewksbury parents, and they were involved as well. And we did absolutely everything virtually. We created several videos with the help of Brian and Jason. We did a new Narcan video, but this was done by Lowell House, and she is the outreach worker, so she did that. We partnered with Phoenix House in Lowell, and they had several presentations, 6, I believe, or 7 workouts and wellness things that we posted on both Tewksbury Cares and the PPNM Facebook page. We have the library that is the Learning Resource Library, and we're continuing to add that. We rolled it out in October. It was with probably about 8 of us from all the different communities, and that's continued to be live. For Tewksbury, I did a couple of presentations in the library. One was Ashley Hall. I'm sure people here know Ashley Hall for the vaping presentation, and that is also on the Facebook page and can be seen. We put together a newsletter, and we actually put together a newsletter at the beginning of COVID, and we just have stuck with it. And it's pretty much whatever's going on that is out and about in the news, and then specific topics related to alcohol, substance abuse in general, not just for youth, and mental health. And we also did another presentation with, I don't know if anybody knows what ACEs is here. It is a test that is given to children, and so you get a certain score. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be going down that road, but she came in and she did all the trauma and all the mental health training for it as well. Feels like a long-winded answer there. We're also planning the symposium on the 7th, and then we're going to have a Narcan drive-through site, kind of like a COVID site. We're hoping. We don't know with the numbers going up if they're going to let us do that now. And we did some Narcan training and handed out some Narcan. So we still have probably about 50 more boxes if people would like. And so kind of what we've done in October, we didn't stop this time. We're just going to keep on going with it.
Okay. Now, last year, Maria and I had attended a vaping seminar that was given at the Ryan School.
Mhm.
And I think we and the presenters matched the number of parents that were there. It was very sad to see such a low number of attendees. I'm curious, I'm hoping that with these sessions being held remotely, that the stigma of being seen live at one of these events doesn't happen if you're essentially watching a webinar type. So do you know if there was better attendance at these virtual sessions?
Yeah, it was. Of course, I was there running it as well, and not many people showed up. But as we playing it, a lot of people were getting a lot of hits. Some of them as many as 91 hits.
Oh, wow.
So it is being watched, but it's after. So we kind of learned a lesson from that as well, that it was the same presentation with Ashley. She actually updated it and did a lot of social injustice and social justice with tobacco, which was wonderful. And we had maybe 5 people. But again, as it's being played and seen again, we're getting some. So people still don't want to get involved unless it's on their time. So maybe this good thing that'll come out of COVID is learning that this is the kind of thing that we need to do. And when people have the time and they're interested, they'll go and they'll look. So and part of this new grant that we're writing, we wanted to bring on somebody that can kind of guide us and how to collect that data a little better so we can target our audience more.
Excellent.
Have you seen Have you seen the Facebook page, Ray? Tewksbury, anybody?
I have not recently. I hate to say that.
Oh, that's okay. As long as you're okay with me still posting it.
Oh, yeah.
We have 400, and it got just as good hits on your Facebook account as well as it did with ours. So.
And I'll just add that I'm seeing many more people flagging the website or Facebook page and liking it than I've seen ever before. So you're definitely reaching new audiences.
And we're cross-threading everything. So we work with the Drug-Free Greater Lowell, which is based out of Lowell Health Department. We have the PPNM. Then all the communities put it up on their sites and their Facebook pages, and then on Tewksbury Cares and PPNM. So we're putting it everywhere, and people are starting to like. I think we're a little bit over 100 on the PPNM, and I think you just recently had 40 or 50 people join. So I don't know if it was who they were, but agreed.
Well, what I'm hoping is with these remote sessions now where you can record them, that as long as the recordings can be made accessible to folks, then that increases the breadth of the public that we can expose or hopefully educate.
I wish I knew what Robert at the library was doing, because everything I've done with him, other than with Ashley, he gets pretty good numbers. I don't know what he does differently, but he does. So, and he puts out my newsletter, and I worked with him on 2 of those things. So I don't know. And he won't give it up either. He won't tell me what he does differently. He just smiles.
Well, he's a good resource to have.
Yes, he is.
So any questions from board members for Maria?
Maria, I'd like to ask, I've been following the Frontline Initiative, and I've been pushing that on Facebook for people to be more aware of it as well. But how is that going? Because I know that's also done virtually. Are you finding that you're getting, are there a lot of responses to joining that?
Do you mean the meeting or in general?
The meetings.
So that's tonight. I haven't, but I have a couple of people who are very involved.
Yeah.
And we're just going to keep that going. And Matt is also signed the one on Mondays.
Mm-hmm.
That he says is fairly well attended.
Okay.
Like anything, when recovery coach left, I think a bunch of people left went with her in her meetings. So, I hope obviously to get more people on it, but right now I feel as though we really are helping the 2 people that are there.
Yep.
So we just keep pushing it. Thank you for pushing it too, Maria. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
How are you?
Any questions from any of the other board members? Okay, well, I definitely appreciate both of you taking time out of your very busy schedule tonight to join both of us. And Marie knows there's always the standing offer, and I've mentioned at the start of this, Chief, but we're here to provide whatever assistance we can to you. So don't ever hesitate asking us if there's something you need a hand with or for us to look into, please let us know.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you
both.
Maria. Thank you, Speaks. Thank you. Stay safe.
Take care, everyone. Nice to see
Happy
you.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too.
Right. Thank you, Maria. Bye-bye. Bye.
Okay. Next on the agenda is Lisa's Pizza, 2312 Main Street. And this is discussion regarding the grease removal system and food establishment update. So two things I had invited Lisa's Pizza for tonight. One was to just sort of get a status update from them of what has taken place in their restaurant with their food consultant since we had our special meeting back in November 5th. But also just to mention, we do know that there is going to be a new mechanical grease separator installed there, and just wanted to let you know that the board is very concerned about ensuring that the device is properly maintained on a daily basis so it does the job that's needed. And back at our October 15th meeting, we had approved a modification to your variance to expand upon the Big Dipper to allow this other product to come in. And we just wanted to let you know that we wish you the best of luck, but we're also very mindful of the fact that we're also concerned about the amount of fog that goes into drains generically at all food establishments. And just, and with town council weighing this, that if the board feels at some point down the road that the maintenance is not being performed as it needs to, therefore there's risk that fog is being allowed to enter the town sewer system in violation of our grease trap regulation, that we do have the ability to rescind the variance if there is proper justification for that. So I hope we don't have to go down that path. I just wanted to be upfront with you that really what happens depends on how you folks are able to keep operations going and to keep the device properly maintained moving forward. So that's all on you, but I just wanted to let you know that that's something we may have to revisit down the road if things don't go the way that they should be. But hopefully we don't have to go down that path. But I just wanted to be upfront with you about that. So if you could just give us a quick overview of what has been done or some of the improvements since we had our last meeting, I think I and the board would appreciate that.
Okay. So since we last saw you, Eileen from Burgers Food Safety Consulting has come by, and we reopened, and she came by and did an inspection, and she also did like a hands-on training with us and our staff. So she was there for about, I think, 2.5 hours or 3 hours, and so she did an inspection. I believe she sent it to Susan, and while she was there, we also established a daily cleaning schedule and a monthly cleaning schedule, and also logs, disinfecting logs, things like that. She also started a floor plan, which somebody requested. I think she sent it to Susan also. And we also spoke about the grease trap, and we plan on installing it soon. The new grease trap, the plumber. We have a contract with a plumber, and so once we have it, we plan on doing a training with Gary from Food Grease Trappers, who's also helping install it, and we could do it together with the board if you'd like, and so everyone knows what the maintenance is. It's pretty simple. We have, something we're going to train the staff on, all the staff, and keep logs, daily logs, of specifically what's being done to maintain it.
Okay, and instead of looking at things, and Susan had sent us the package that shows all the different checklists, and I'm a firm believer of checklists as long as they're utilized. Checklists are a great resource, and I'm glad that there's training that has been done. And I guess my question for both of you is, the training was done at that point in time. but staff will come and go. So, and it's not the board's role to specify how you operate your business. But one thing you may want to consider doing is whether it's one of the two of you or someone else, appoint someone to be your official trainer, so that as you hire people, that person is the one that's making sure that those new hires get trained in whatever needs to get done. But if you can identify someone with that role, then at least there's a point of contact from the department. So if there's any training issues, they know who to go to for that. And then I think that helps both of you as well.
Sure, we could do that.
Well, we have employees coming. Like, we've had 2 new employees start this week. One's gone, so they come and go weekly. That would be. But Danny and I have learned all the rules. We've changed all the things that we were doing that were not compliant with the safety. We've adjusted all the. I mean, there were small fixes. There were fixes that could have, like where we keep the chicken, how we cool down food. It was things like that where we've just adjusted how we work. I mean, it's pretty hard finding employees right now, and they come and go. Sometimes we'll have an employee start and then switch in 3 days. But Danny and I are making them, one of us is always there. We have a pretty big crew. Most of our employees have been working for us since day one. It's not like our core crew. New people who come in, some stay, some don't. Some stay for a week, some stay for 2 weeks, some stay for a month. But we'll make sure, I mean, we have employees there that were there before we were there. So they all know the rules. Danny and I know the rules, and we're enforcing it on everyone. We're much, much cleaner. We're probably, if not the cleanest, one of the cleanest places in Tewksbury right now. We've gotten rid of any we had an outdated freezer, which we just bought a brand new freezer on the top floor. We've got a new stainless steel. Our whole kitchen is stainless steel right now, which is much easier to clean. We don't it's shiny, so everything's just shiny. But yeah, we're all rules. Everything that we were doing wrong, once we figured a way to fix it, it's just changed. It's not even so much of teaching; it's just how we function. So even new employees come in, they're not going to know how to do it the wrong way. They're just going to have to do it the way we do it. But we're making sure everything's done.
Okay, and that was why we imposed these conditions. So I'm glad to hear that. I'm getting feedback. I'm not sure about anyone else.
Yeah, I hear the feedback. I'm getting it from me too.
Somebody's echoing.
I'm getting feedback as well, but my phone was on mute as I'm in the driving car.
Now, if you can mute everyone else, Brian, by any chance? At least those are in phone, because it's hard to mute when you're on the phone.
Yeah, I did, Mr. Chairman. The only issue is if I mute anyone on the phone, you're just going to have to hit *6 to unmute, because I can no longer unmute anyone on the phone. So just anyone on the phone, take note of that.
Okay, let's see. Well, that's good. Now there's no more feedback. Okay. So again, it sounds like you're on the correct path. We hope to see you continue along that path. We do wish you the best of success. And hopefully all this training and all the work the food safety consultant has done and will continue to do with you will pay great dividends for your business.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So Susan, is there anything you want to?
Still getting that feedback.
Yeah.
No, Mr. Chairman, we've stayed in communication. We'll continue to do so. I can't handle the feedback. Now I can't hear you, Mr. Barry.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Now can you hear me? Okay. For any of the other board members that are out there, if you're able to *6, do you have any comments or questions for either of the two representatives from Lisa's Pizza here tonight?
Charlie Rue here.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Mr. Chairman? Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if they had the waste receptacles been set up yet, and if they do or not, who is the if you have a licensed contractor set up to remove that waste.
Yes, we do. It would be Food Grease Trappers who would be removing it. They're out of Lowell.
Okay, and you have your receptacles on site, your barrels?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
And then just for our benefit, Charlie's in the business. One of the handouts that Director Sawyer had sent to the board looked like a product cut from Grease Shield that was Grease Shield Daily Maintenance. And there it shows like a rubberized pallet with some storage containers or fog. Is that something similar to what you were?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a fog container and there's also a solids container, and we're gonna get two. So when we remove it, we can replace it with a clean one right away, and clean that one and just have it so it's easier that way. More so. And they'd have to be cleaned and maintained every day.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Joe.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
As it relates to the pre-cleaning procedures in the sink, a lot of grease and fog can be eliminated by pre-scraping, pre-wiping, and cleaning into the same receptacle that you empty your basket of solid waste into prior to washing in the 3-bay sink. That's one of the things I think that has to be incorporated in your protocol for utilizing the Big Dipper operation, is the fact that if you can eliminate product from going into the 3-bay sink, you're going to have less daily maintenance, you're going to have less weekly maintenance, and you're going to have less quarterly maintenance on the Big Dipper. So I would suggest that part of the training be pre-wipe prior to washing and utilizing the drain and dependent entirely on this Big Dipper system. That's my first point, and I suggest that you try to train everybody to make sure that you eliminate solids and as much grease as possible into a solid waste prior to utilizing it in your 3-bay sink.
I'll just say that in the washing process, it's filled with hot water, obviously, and soap. So we make sure to do that. Otherwise, the water's going to get dirty, and we have to keep switching it. So switch the water. We're putting dirty dishes into the washer. It's going to get dirty, and everyone's going to see that. So we do that just so we don't have to waste the water. We try to put cleaner dishes in there.
Well, that's a good response. My second point is that the product that you're using, many supporting videos on YouTube that would assist anybody using that technology in the cleaning methodologies. And even though it's a fairly simple system and cleaning regime that's associated with it, there probably should be a supervisor that is checking any delegation to employees that would be cleaning the Big Dipper. You know that emptying the solid side is very important. Emptying the container into an approved disposal is important, but also making sure that the wiper and those other things are clean. And then the weekly maintenance of checking the inverts and making sure they're clean. But the videos on YouTube for those types of products are very instructive, and it would almost seem that you would want to incorporate those videos into your maintenance program for anybody that would be working on the Big Dipper, and reporting back to the supervisor, who could retrain with a video if there was a question.
Yep, we've already watched a couple videos and we'll watch more. And it's usually like one or two guys that handle it on the daily basis, and we'll just have them watch it too and show them how to do it to make sure they're doing it correctly. Also, Danny and I are, one of us is always there, so we see them do it. And if they ever have a question, they can just ask us. But it's usually the same guy doing it, so once he gets it, he'll know how to do it. And we have always kept up with the Big Dipper on a daily basis, and we'll do the same with the new grease shield that we're going to install.
And lastly, the quarterly maintenance morphs into a yearly maintenance, and generally you have a contractor come in and look at your Big Dipper and make an assessment if the weekly and quarterlies are doing the job so that it's maintained in its top condition. Have you talked with the manufacturer about having a contractor come in on a yearly basis?
Well, we have them come in, what is it, Danny, monthly to pick it up, make sure it's working.
And you have that contract in place?
Yeah, they come for our grease trap now. We've always had that. They come, they come and clean it out. I guess that'll be the monthly maintenance. We clean it daily, then they come and really clean it monthly.
Do you recall the name of that company?
Yeah, Grease Trappers, as Danny said earlier.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions from board members? Okay, so Susan, what's next with the department and Lisa's Pizza?
Well, as the board required, they have engaged their consultant. She's done the inspection and she will continue to do so as you requested for the 6 months and make any changes and recommendations to follow the order of the board or the decision of the board, basically. So that's really where it is now. It's kind of in their hands to continue to improve and just move forward. So.
Okay, well, I thank you for coming tonight, and don't take offense on what I'm about to say, but we hope not to see you before us again. That would be a good thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, good luck in the second chance you're being given, and take full advantage of it.
Thank you.
And we wish you the best. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Have a good one. Good night.
Okay. Looks like Ron stepped away for a sec. So let's just talk about the meeting schedule and see if Ron comes back in the meantime. Oh, there we are. Ron, you're right on cue. So next item on the agenda tonight is Ron Beauregard, Tobacco Control Agent, discussion updating regulations in response to state regulation changes. And this is due from the last two times you've come before since the new tobacco regulations went into effect of just our ongoing discussions that I think Tewksbury needs to get our tobacco regulations on par with what the state is so that we are even what the regulations are, because right now we're sort of not on par with what the state has, because the state has things that are more restrictive than what we have.
That's right.
And I must say, from looking at all this stuff, it gave us an awful lot to read. I definitely see the lawyer in you now.
But now you didn't get my summary, did you? I put together a summary at the end, and I apologize. I got that out late. They're just essentially my notes. It's I probably got it. I didn't get it off until later on this afternoon. But
yeah, I think this is.
Oh, that's it.
The
yes,
one page.
right.
Yeah.
Great,
that is great. That.
Oh, I'm glad you. It makes it. Looking at that red insertions and deletions, it can get a little chaotic. And I thought about it today, and I said, something, just to kind of help focus and really hopefully shorten the discussion. I'll go on as long as you like, but I think these are essentially about a dozen policies that fall under either, as you mentioned, bringing the Tewksbury's regulations up to the state standard, which again, they would be enforced anyway, but we're trying to make the regulations also a tool for being a one-stop shopping. Not that technically all regulations have to be read state, local, and federal, but by doing what you had mentioned earlier, it'll make it an easier read and a more accurate read.
Right. So one thing I just want to preface before I have you present everything that you provided to us, in going through our regulations that you redlined and sort of put in what you see as being the language we would want to look at considering adopting, I think everything in that regulation includes all the changes that are in the summary table, all based on the new tobacco regs in Massachusetts. But you would also added another piece, which was language if the board so decides to impose a cap on the number of tobacco sales permits that are issued by the town, whether for tobacco only sales or general tobacco sales like at a convenience store. And I only mention because I'm not sure how in-depth other board members had gone through all these volumes of paper that you submitted, which I'm glad you did. I know we've talked as a board with you at the last couple times you've come before us about caps, and some other towns have put caps in place. So I'd rather we focus the talk right now on getting our regulation up to par with what the state has. But then I'd like to, at the end of that, have you talk a bit about the caps. And I'd like the board members to sort of ask questions to you about caps, because I honestly don't know what the feeling is of other members of the board as it relates to whether we'd look at caps and is it more of a nice thing to add, or are there some reasons why we would really want to look at adding caps? So if you want to take a walk through us through getting our regulations in par with what the state has to start.
Thank you. Just so you know, everything in addition to bringing you up to the level of the state regulations, particularly the 105 CMR 665, which is the newest set of regulations, the mammoth regulations that really made a huge change in tobacco control law in the state. That is one separate matter. Everything else you see there that is added in the regulations, we work off a template that the Mass Municipal Association puts together. And sometimes the temptation is to just put before you the model regulations But that means that you don't have anything to work. You had your own set of regulations that you put together, I think it was about 4.5 years ago. And I thought it took more time, but I wanted you to see that what happens over 4.5 years is there are a lot of little changes, some of them smaller, some of them more significant. Again, I would stand by saying that these 11 that for the local options are the most major of those that have been added. Other things are tweaking things. Yeah, they change things, some very little and some maybe a little more significantly. But they're all taken off the model regulations provided by the Mass Municipal Association. And they do tend to change. Sometimes things don't work quite the way they wanted to, or they didn't read the way they wanted them to. So that's why you have such a massive red. In regard to the state, I'm glad I put these notes together to just really follow along here. These first 11, most of these are included, if not all of them are included, I think most are included in the one-page educational statement that all of your applicants, essentially owners of all of your 31 retail establishments holding a tobacco sales permit, signed. And we really applaud them for the efforts they've taken to review the one-page statement, because we do know that while they have a legal obligation to read all of the regulations, including all of 105 CMR 665, I think the one-page educational statement made it easier to digest, to know really what the big issues are. And again, the main issues are the state law provides for the mandatory IDing of all tobacco purchasers. You had what was considered ahead of the game 4.5 years ago to ID anyone who appeared to be over the age of 40 when the state law was at 27. The second would be that, do you want me to just go through these? Feel free to.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And then the second would be a mandatory ID of all customers before they even enter a smoke or a vape shop, also known as an adult-only retail tobacco store. We've talked about this where every collaborative has a different way of how that is going to be exercised. In fact, we've actually maintained that since it was an adult-only store, even under your old regulations, that the requirement would be ID someone as soon as they enter the store. But this is now encapsulated in the state law that specifically, there's no way to shape or form to read it any differently. You have to ID someone before they enter your store if you're a smoker or a vape shop. The third here would be that all flavors, including mint, menthol, and wintergreen, which was the big exception that was included in Tewksbury's regulations, the mint, menthol, and wintergreen, the biggest one being, of course, menthol, because it was the flavor of the second largest cigarette brand in the state and in the country. That had been removed, so that's now part of the state law. There's a new one here that I don't think I focus so much on the education because it's a work in progress. Some of them are very obvious, and that is a flavor enhancer. It's called a tobacco product flavor enhancer. One of the main drives of putting this together was to stay ahead of the game so that there aren't any substances or additives that would defeat the very strict rule of no flavored tobacco products. And perhaps the most easily demonstrable cases would be there are substances, I think usually of a liquid form, that you add to an unflavored nicotine juice to make it flavored. So it would be a little silly to ban cherry flavored vape if you could just buy a cherry, would look like almost like a food coloring that you would just add to your cartridge or to your pod. So that's prohibited. There's another one that the state is still working to come up with a specific form, but as of June 1st of this year, before you sell any tobacco product, the retailer has to have in their hands a manufacturer's sheet, a document that will certify that every product on their shelves is not flavored and does not follow what they call a characterizing flavor, which is defined in your regulations and I believe has not changed other than those 3 exceptions on the flavors. We've seen these, but we're really working on making certain that they're accessible and that the retailers are comfortable with knowing that or should be comfortable with knowing that they need to be authored by a manufacturer or a manufacturer's agent. Lists that are put together by distributors and such that do not suffice. Then this child-resistant packaging for liquid nicotine packages. The state attorney general's office had passed some regulations. I think they're referred to in the model in the amendments that I had inserted. I think it's 940 CMR, something in the 20s. In any event, that regulation has been a state law for, I want to say, a couple of years now. But that law by the Attorney General, while it is the law of the land in Massachusetts, it's based on the Chapter 93A, which is a consumer protection statute. So it allows the Attorney General to go forward on any complaints for non-child-resistant packaging. And it allows others who have been damaged to file a civil suit, but they don't technically give the Board of Health the authority to enforce that. So this would simply incorporate what is already the law and give us, meaning myself or any agents of the board, the authority to enforce. And that's, of course, a very important policy due to the poisonous nature of nicotine. And then there's one that's sort of a subcategory of that is not allowing any person or any retail permit holder, in our case, from refilling sealed vaping cartridges. This gets into the, it is against the law due to those Attorney General regulations for anybody, any person, to refill these cartridges. Unfortunately, this is something that is done. I remember I went through this with my ink cartridges. That was legal, but you used to be able to insert, the powder or the toner into the cartridge. This is prohibited, but we've limited to the permit holders due to our enforcement being focused on that group. This one here was one that the Board of Health, I know, did not adopt, but along with many other communities as well. And there was all debates about whether or not there was, what the efficacy of that rule was to not have tobacco sales at pharmacies. I did out in the field, I did get people were very congratulatory to the efforts to do that with convenience stores that were located near pharmacies because they felt that the sales just shifted to them. But on the other side of the argument, which was a valid one as well, is that there's nothing so incongruent as selling drugs that cure you along with those that do great damage to you. So that would just be incorporated in the regulations as well. By the way, that one would just, on all of these, you have that new fining structure that the state put together under 105 CMR 665, and those are limited to only violations of that regulation. This one here, the pharmacy ban, this was passed earlier under Chapter 112, and that one there, that one would fall under your, even though I've got it categorized here in the state, which it is, it kind of falls out a little bit. In fact, actually, even the child-resistant packaging and the sealed vaping, anything that you don't see no, I take that back. That language that you see in the child-resistant and the sealed vaping cartridges, at first, I added it. You may have it in your copy, and I apologize. When I reread these today, I added the section of the CMR that you see on liquid nicotine, child-resistant, and sealed vaping cartridges. I don't think you see it in your copy right now of the regs. I noticed, I caught this as I reread 105 CMR, and the model regulations didn't provide that. It just made reference to the Attorney General regulations. So I put that in there. Okay, and then finally, the vape sales, anyone selling the vapes, they can't sell a vape that's more than 35 milligrams per milliliter of nicotine within the juice, with the exception of the adult-only retail tobacco stores. They can sell them. And finally, the last two, I mentioned the 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 for any violation of 105 CMR 665. And the last one here is all of the retailers, as with the flavor certification of non-flavor, they have to have essentially, they don't use the same words of certification, but documentation that the nicotine levels are no more than 35 milligrams per milliliter. They have to be available for inspection. So. Could everyone hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good. Oh, good. By the way, I came in a couple of times there earlier. I was just on the other side of the computer, and I was thinking I was the culprit of the echoing. By the way, it sounded like a pretty good studio version. You know, the kind of studio set if you wanted to do some singing. Like feedback.
We can hear you, Ron. Thank you very much for that presentation. We really appreciate it. I just had one question. So you mentioned that the Board of Health couldn't enforce unless we put it in our regulation. Is that the case?
No, I apologize if I said that.
Did I hear it incorrectly? Sorry.
No, that's all right. If I said that, I'm incorrect. Anything that's in 105 CMR 665 is enforceable by there's a provision within that regulation. That's why earlier I said that I wouldn't use the word cosmetic to incorporate them in your regulations. I think it only makes things confusing when your own regulations say the retailers need to read it, and then they're reading something that says something different in the state regulations. So I think it was, even if you put aside any of the potential local policy options, incorporating the state makes it a lot cleaner. And there's also some issues which I didn't mention in the summary, but I apologize, I'm not looking at my notes, but I think you have a 24-month, a 2-year look back period for your fines and such. It could be helpful. Well, depending on how you want to deal with that, it could be helpful, or maybe you would think too severe to put together a tolling period that would mirror, which the draft does have. It's, by the way, all of those things are inserted. They're not suggestions by me. That's never the way I've operated. I try to really keep it down and tamp down any of my. I'm not here really as an advocate per se.
No, we appreciate that, Ron. And the Board of Health has worked on their regulations to the point that, you know, we want to regulate the things that aren't regulated elsewhere. And so I was just curious to make sure we put in the regulation what we needed to give you and to give anyone else the power to do the enforcement. But thank you so much for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Well, and I think the other aspect of this too is that from the retailer perspective, it causes confusion if we have one local regulation that does not match what the state has. So I think in trying to improve that so that the retail establishments don't have any misunderstandings, that it definitely helps to have our regulation match what the state has. And I, up until this point, I thought pretty good about our regulations. I figured, there can't be that many changes. Our regulations would need to be on par with what the state now has. But this was an eye-opener for me. So I greatly appreciate the effort you put into this, Ron, because I could not have put this level of effort into this.
Thanks. I kind of had, after I sent it to Susan yesterday, I felt badly a little bit. I said, oh my God, look at this sea of red. It makes it look like, I mean, some of the red is, you get a preamble that they update that. So there's a lot of verbiage there. And you touched upon seems like a page of options for capping. So, if you want me to discuss that, I'd be more than happy to, in terms of the rationale. And we always have, well, I shouldn't say we always have, but I certainly know with capping, I don't have them with me, but all of those variety of caps, I can get you a Mass Municipal listing of communities that do. But there's no question in my mind, Tewksbury has been a leader on this topic and has been a leader even with the regulations they have now. This movement by the state is just revolutionary. I mean, the amount of difference. So these things you see here at the top, these top 11, or most of them, are just big time game changers. But you were way ahead of the curve, and still are, even if they stay the same.
Well, maybe if you could just spend a couple minutes and just address the bottom half of that summary sheet that we get this afternoon about the 11 major amendments concerning local policy options, because some of these I think will come into potentially mention of a cap in terms of, but I think also where there are some distance or setback, or not setback, but distance requirements.
Yes, this is I always say I said 11 and 11 here, but they all condense to really just a handful of topics, and some of them much smaller. I mean, the first one I mentioned here is when they rework your definition of adult-only retail tobacco store is just called a retail tobacco store, which, by the way, you have company with the state, because that's exactly what they still call it in 105 CMR 665. But there's been a preference on a local level to emphasize the adult-only portion of it. So in its definition, it adds a few things. Not sure. In some of these things, the first one here, I say can't share a space with another business. We've had proposals, and I know my colleagues have had proposals where dividing stores and having basically a back room become a new store, and the divider and all of that. So that's kind of way this is sort of aimed at, is making certain that it's not just sort of a faux store. So you can't.
I can confirm that, Ron. I've had conversations with people who said, well, if I have a separate door, can I just lock my door and then go into the next room and sell this product? So that's why this is being addressed this way.
Exactly. And so we're encouraged to suggest this as a change. Maybe some of them you'd want, some of them you wouldn't. A separate entrance. There was a little tricky thing that occurred. I think Susan's well versed in this area about the food. I always thought I knew what foods and beverages were, but I guess they're not all created equal. Some with requirements for permits. I think you can get some gum and chips now without it. I don't know. But the whole idea of the origination of the retail tobacco store, although only retail tobacco store, was to make it definitely 100%, almost essentially total difference from a convenience store. So they don't want any of the trappings, whether it be a ring ding or what have you. I don't know if they still sell those. So this would be no food or beverages regardless of permit requirements, just to prevent that convenience store feel to it. Another one that some of the collaborators were strict about interpreting the way the language of your original language, your existing language of a retail tobacco store, which is no one can the wording, I believe, is no one can enter the store that's 21 or under. But did that include an employee? There was a question in regards to what the interpretation was. So the change here would just be clear that would, if you wanted to say no one can even work in the store that's under the age of 21. And then that weird one, I say weird because it looks a little strange, and I think DJ Wilson over at Mass Municipal knew this, but we give an explanation. When it says no new vape shops within 25 feet of another store selling tobacco, it's more to avoid what Susan had mentioned, just sort of something really close by that's maybe not quite so solid of a separate bricks and mortar structure. So that's that. That second one, I mean, the chances of that happening, and I must say, in Tewksbury, based on for all the little bit of ups and downs on a few of the retailers, to have 3 sales with $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 consequence. The idea that we get three sales to underage folks within I think it's called a permit year. In any event, it says that, all bets are off after that. You won't get your permit renewed. It doesn't sound like a totally unreasonable suggestion. I can only imagine. I didn't ask why was it put in, but I'm going to guess that it's happened somewhere. So they put it in for that reason. Okay, now these other ones, I like to be simple on these. I'm trying to do all this without really, which if you want me to, I will get into the nitty gritty of the language, but I'd rather not look at the language. I'm just going by a generalization of memory. And I think I have this. I'm not getting into every detail, but it's the essence of each one. First is the cap, just a total cap on the number of retailers. We looked at, I don't know, I think I sent something that the state had on density. Did you see that? I don't know whether you saw the chart, but basically, I just took. I'm biased. Having my office in Andover, they look at the number of retailers per 1,000 adults. And Andover, which I think, by the way, I think Andover has Tewksbury beat on population level. I think it's about, I don't know, you're in the 30s, right? Tewksbury's in the 30s, somewhere like that. I think, I don't know, I'm guessing, I think Andover's somewhere around 35. You might be 31, 32, something like that. And they have 0.36 retailers per 1,000 adults. Tewksbury is right about in line with Massachusetts, which is 1.02 retailers per 1,000 adults. You're at 1.07, so essentially the same. The arguments for density, there's plenty of, I didn't send you all that literature. I know we discussed some of this before, back when, but, I'm just reading out here. Advances the social norms about tobacco. You get the ubiquitous presence of tobacco retailers, gives the impression it's available and accessible. It increases exposure of industry advertising, which is really an interesting legal issue because you can't go in and say you can't put up the advertisement. That would be an infringement on business rights to speech. However, you can put a cap on the number of permits there are. So it's a little more of a crude way to do it, but you just don't have another place to put advertisements. It just in general increases the availability among youth, increases brand recognition, encourages impulse sales. These might be studies you don't agree with, but they're out there and they are from some reliable sources. So that's the first one, is an overall cap. The second one is what I call an attrition provision, which is in the 13B. And that just simply is, we have this in Newburyport, we have this in Andover. I think those are the only two in our collaborative. And those just, they go into the sunset. If somebody goes out of business, which has happened in both communities at least once, the number goes down automatically. So there's no issue of a waiting period and such. You've capped it at the number. Some towns in our collaborative had put a couple extra, meaning if you're at 31 right now, if you wanted to give a little wiggle room in case there's a new business on the horizon in the next, several months or so, you put a couple of convenience stores, a couple of stores open for availability. The second one, the next one here is 13C. This is a cap within a cap. Sounds confusing, but it's really not. There's no special permit to operate a smoke or a vape shop. All of your smoke and vape shops in town have the same exact permit as a convenience store or grocery store. They just indicate through their operation and a statement that they are going to only, they're going to adhere to what an adult-only retail tobacco store is. So it's more the operation than the permit itself. This provision would limit the number of permits issued for those who will operate as an adult-only tobacco store. It is important to note that there is a question. We've had a lot of vape store and smoke shop store closings, including one in your community. A very difficult thing. I remember Dave and we met. I remember they came before the board and seemed to really run a pretty straight, at least operation, professional and such. So you get to know these people and you know how they operate and such. That was difficult. But anyways, I only mentioned that you can put this in. Maybe there's not going to be a proliferation anyways. But I suppose if you say, well, there's not going to be proliferation anyways, just in the event that people want to go in that direction, let's say high nicotine vapes, which is the major draw or one of the major draws. They can sell the stronger vapes. For instance, they can sell the Juul 5% pod, which is the original pod, which was a favorite among youth. The convenience stores can't sell that level of strength level at this point because it exceeds the 35 milligrams per milliliter. 5% is a different equation, and that's why we have a uniform equation that's required by the state. But it does translate into more than 35, the 5%. So in any event, that's a potential there. And then the next ones are the ones, Chairman, you were mentioning about the, how many feet, a buffer zone, I call them, buffer zones from schools. If you didn't get those, so I don't know if I sent them to you now, but there's a chart. The state also puts together, they have a great group there. It's epidemiologists and folks that are well-rounded in terms of their knowledge of these things and a lot of things. And they have a map of Tewksbury, and it shows one of them is a real map, condensed more just downtown and showing the schools. And it says one out of 3 retailers in Tewksbury are located within walking distance of a school, 0.5 miles. So, these are things that these are the things that the state looks at and other organizations look at as factors and exposure to advertisement as well as convenience of them walking to the store. And again, that would only be for new stores. If you put a cap, as we originally talked about, well, there won't really be any new stores. So that meaning they could buy a new store wouldn't include the store that is purchasing a retailer that's already within the 500 feet of this, within 500 feet of the school. After you read the language, if you have any questions for me, if the board wishes to consider that buffer zone, and you feel in any way that the language is ambiguous, please let me know, and we can work on that. And I can get technical assistance from Cheryl Sabara and DJ Wilson on that. And then there's the other one, prohibit applicants for tobacco sales permit to be 500 feet from another store that sells tobacco. Just goes right into that whole density issue. You can be a believer or a non-believer, but that's the argument for it. Blunt wraps. I just wanted to touch upon that because I didn't want to be the one that said I didn't mention it. Mass Municipal will have a very lengthy list of communities that have banned all the blunt wraps. Tewksbury's in company with many of it just seemed like an Art Collaborative in particular. I think there's some others as well. That the idea was, as with flavored tobacco under the old model, most of these blunt wraps were flavored anyway. So it went to the smoke in the vape shops. But the model regs, model is a very complimentary, how would you not want to go with model regulations? But we'll call it a template, okay? It's a template. And so the model regulations do include an entire ban on them. Having said that, by the way, and I know I go back and forth a little bit, just know that on the blunt wrap, the only blunt wraps we're talking about at this point, they have to be made of tobacco and they can't be flavored because it's a flavored tobacco product. So the limit of what an adult retail tobacco store can provide in terms of a blunt wrap is extremely narrow compared to what they had before June 1st. So, I'm obviously avoiding the elephant in the room in regard to that. The question would be is what they are designed for, whether it be for tobacco use or perhaps other use of a material now that's legal. So you can all consider that. And the last 3 things here require written. This one's an interesting one. I'll be really upfront with you. Some communities have adopted this. I do not know how many yet. It is in the model regulations. It requires a written plan for disposal of liquid nicotine. Now, I looked at the law that's referenced in the regulation. I don't have it right in front of me. Dizzying, extremely long, deals with a lot of different dangerous, hazardous substances. This is for, and I asked about this one, and apparently there are some communities that have this in place, and the retailers have a plan. I don't know whether you have similar businesses in town that have to comply with this law, but the idea is that it isn't preferable. Just we're mentioning, I'll never think of the Big Dipper, and I try to think of astronomical terms in terms of thinking of the Big Dipper, but I've been polluted a bit by going to too many boards of health meetings, so I think of something different. But in any event, here, you're not supposed to, if it breaks or if it's expired, it's not something. It's kind of like putting motor oil in the dumpster. You're not supposed to do that. And the land mandatories. That's I read through these 3 times, but I still can miss things. So, the one beauty of reading through the model regulations and putting it in red and inserting it as we did is it really gets you sensitive to seeing the differences between what you have, rather than just these are the major policies and everything else you can kind of accept. I didn't want that. I want you to be able to know exactly what it is you would be accepting if you accepted this new language. That's why I put it in red with the tracking device. This one here, I noted it. It used to be, or it is, and you have this provision, but it just says you may be suspended, I guess, or may be revoked. And this says you shall. It's mandatory, one or the other. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about that one, but I have a little bit of misgivings about it, only because we've always worked with what are the specific facts. Not maybe perhaps all infractions are created equal. Certainly not having, the stubbornness of maybe not putting up a sign that you're supposed to put up. As frustrating as it is, and this has never happened in Tewksbury, but if it happened, I put it up. You finally don't put it up. You're not cooperating with me. Does that mean a suspension? I don't know. That's in your purview. But if it was something else more severe, maybe you would want to do that. So anyways, that takes away a little discretion from you. And then the last one is, this one is tricky. It's straightforward. When there is a permit suspension, which you've had, and I've had in other communities as well, does the tobacco have to just simply covered up, put under the counter, put in the back room, or as the provision here indicates, move it out? It's got to be outside the building. So just reasonable minds can disagree and agree on these policies. All right, well, this was supposed to make this shorter. I hope I didn't make it too long.
No, so I actually have a question at the very last item. Maybe it's the engineer in me, but if that was to go into effect and the tobacco retailer has to move all tobacco products on the premise, does it state any requirements about where it can be kept? I mean, you obviously don't want to have it going into the establishment owner's home where there may be kids there. So it's sort of, you're taking out of an area that, if it's an adult-only tobacco store, you're protected from youth getting access to it. But if it's like a convenience store, is there any regulation part of that states if it has to come off the establishment premise, any guidelines about where they can or cannot store it?
No. It just says all tobacco products shall be removed from the retail establishment upon suspension.
So they could keep it in their trunk and keep driving around day to day until the suspension is released, or bring it home, or technically keep it in the sidewalk. So it's sort of an odd requirement.
Sounds like you might have some ideas for locks and, I don't know, maybe some middle ground.
No, but I'm more looking at, as Susan said, we're trying to get our regulations updated, but only enforce those things that we really have power to enforce, but also to make them enforceable. And I look at that one.
Just to give a little, the rationale for it is it's sort of the there's a little provision in the flavored vape, flavored tobacco products, which includes vapes, which I didn't put in the list here, but they add a few words in that section in its regard to, it's usually shall not sell or offer to sell or distribute or offer to distribute, and they put possess. And the reason why they put possess, so in other words, now it's a violation to possess flavored products. Why? Because things are in the back room, things are under the counter. Not here in Tewksbury. I'm not making any allegations here. I'm just saying the temptation would be there for it to be in the store and to go get it for perhaps a customer in the know. These are the things that have been presented to me as the reasons for this movement out of the store. So the same argument would go, the same rationale would go, if you're under suspension, get it away from you so that it's not tempting. It's a regular customer that comes in. And so that's why I'm saying that maybe you might want to put together something in between, that it's locked away somewhere, or, a little it's in the back.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're right to focus on it's a logistical issue. So you got to pick your techniques.
So I guess before we get into open discussion of the board, so as we did when we revised this back in 2016, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago. We did have at least, I think, 2 public hearings to discuss. And there, I think it was more because we were looking at increasing the age. So we were making it stricter than the state and also increasing the card to anyone under 40. Here, I look at it, we'd still do a public hearing, but unless we add something new above and beyond what the state has, it's more of a technicality for what we're updating.
Yeah, I mean,
May I
that's
make a
I'd still offer. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. I think the way if the board just went with mirroring what the state regulations and state law is, we could put in the notice just to assure anybody, just not to, so that time isn't wasted. I mean, it could be an educational moment, I suppose, but those we offer anyway, so anyone could, get an education or further education on the law. But it would be we'd put together a hearing notice that would be clear that the board is only looking at this. Now, of course, when you're in an open meeting like that, there's people can make suggestions and things can go outside. So you wouldn't want to make it too. You wouldn't want to focus on exclusivity on the state stuff solely. I suppose unless the board agreed upon that, had a vote. I've never been on that. You're right. I've never been on this territory before, so I'm kind of thinking it through as we're speaking, and I don't think there's anything that prevents the board from adding something just in case. So, and it's the right, of course, of the retail community to be there to provide input in the event that minds were changed and they wanted to go with something a little extra. So.
Right. I'm thinking part of it procedure-wise, because if ultimately my goal is I'd like to have this revised sooner than later, and I'd rather have it done while Susan is still the director here. And so I'm looking at December or January, and that's where I was sort of trying to think this out in my head of, because it's not anything that we're new and stricter than what the state has, then I'm thinking we may be able to just get by with one public hearing, unlike the last time where we had at least 2 public hearings. So, and we spaced those apart. So it wasn't just over the course of a month, but I'm just trying
to. If the board, I mean, what I could ask, I'm not saying you want to go in this direction, but if the board was 100% certain they didn't want to go any further than the state law and had it all drawn up to amend it to reflect the state law, yeah, I'm going to take that back. And the only reason I take it back is it all depends on what you mean by state law. At least that's in my opinion is whatever. Remember how I mentioned earlier about the pharmacy ban? Or that one we don't have to worry about because they're going to be the pharmacies was the most compliant move that I've ever dealt with. Everything was gone because they're mostly major chains and such like that. And frankly, I think most of the managers and such want to get rid of it. But there would be a few things in here on the top 11, in addition to the pharmacy, the sealed vaping cartridges, the child-resistant packages. I was trying to think of a way of not having a hearing, which of course legally you don't have to have a hearing, but I've never ever recommended that as an option. It doesn't. It's not my style, and I recommend
and we'd want to have a hearing because I don't want, and I'd rather us to be doing this as transparently as possible.
Yes.
So, I guess one other question I have, and I'll sort of pose this to you as well, Bob, and this is one thing that I guess I've been looking at. The Tewksbury Board of Health regulations, we tend to have a non-criminal disposition fine setup of $100, $200, $300. This makes the penalties much larger, therefore more impactful. Yet, in our town bylaws, by special town meeting, they actually adopted first offense is written warning, second offense is a $100 fine, third offense is $200 fine, fourth and subsequent offenses are $300 fines, and that was back in 1991. So definitely, purchase value of the dollar doesn't go as far now as it did back then. I guess my question a bit more to you, Bob, and maybe I have to follow up with town council on this is, I'm not sure if we can even look at putting in fines this hefty if it goes against what was voted on almost 39 years ago at town meeting. And then from your perspective, Ron, too, with your legal background of, do we need to have fines that match what the state has? Because if someone's found to be in violation of our regulation, we have one fee structure. When would this other fee structure be applied by the state? Who would be the one that would apply that penalty?
All right. Well, first of all, you bring up a good point about getting, I would say, like a town council checkoff on whatever route you decide to go. The way I understand it, as explained to us, is that, of course, these are now essentially criminal fine levels. The non-criminal disposition statute only accounts for fines of $300 or less. The way that this has been enforced in other communities is that after an inspection or a compliance check is done, in our case, the compliance checks due to COVID have not been done. But the way it would work is you find the violation, you issue a correction and a cease and desist order, which would state the type of violation. An order in the letter, an order would be to cease and desist from whatever violation that was. There'd be also an order to pay the fine of $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000, depending on first, second, or third violation. There would be a provision in that letter for a right to make a written for the permit holder to make a written request to the Board of Health for a hearing, and the retailer would have 7 days to request that hearing. If a violation would be upheld by the Board of Health, but the fine was unpaid, the town could opt to do one of two things. And this is where I do not have an expertise. I think any of the trainings I've gone through and educational conferences, calls, still think it's left to each community to make a decision as to how they feel they implement 105. Because you're essentially, even though it's your own regulations, you have the authority under 105 CMR 665 to enforce their state of regulations. You're getting into the idea with the question, I think, as to whether or not the state law prevents you from issuing a fine lower. And everything I've heard, while not specifically answering that question, the answer would seem to me to be yes. This brings in a whole ball of wax in regard to, technically, it's a violation not to have a particular sign up. And it still calls for that same $1,000 penalty as a sale to an underage youth or underage person. Is there allowance for discretion? And if that's a question, I could certainly have that addressed. By the way, the other way so one is a court action. It would be, and I don't know the specifics of the court action if a fine was not paid. However, another route to go is your local regulations already provide a provision that if a fine is unpaid, the town can opt for not renewing a permit until all the fines that are pending that are paid.
Right.
So, which, by the way, I think in most cases, I mean, as long as you're patient, if somehow in the cycle of violations to renewals, if it was 11 months and 28 days, I suppose that'd be frustrating to wait, but you know, it might be an advantage over going through the court process.
Yeah.
So
No,
anyway,
it's
I know
more
that's
that I'm not a big fan of skyrocketing up the fines, but I also, and again, we'll check with town council. I don't want to put something in it that we technically can't do because it goes against what special town meeting had approved. But also knowing that technically, I don't think that our regulations can be weaker than the state, but I don't think a fine is necessarily a weakening regulation. It's more the penalty phase.
I like your analysis. I think it's worthy of running that by town council for sure.
Okay. How many other communities in your collaborative have gone down this path already, or are we one of the first?
Oh, to change to the model regulations?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. To go with the uniformity. You're the first.
Okay. Okay. So
that would
board
raise
members.
That would raise a few issues. This is the vice chair. First of all, I don't think that our enforcement is supposed to be a revenue-raising initiative. Our enforcement is supposed to be remedial and compliance. So being the first to implement hefty fines appears to me to be a revenue-raising issue rather than an enforcement issue. Because again, the entire regulatory process is designed to be remedial and to bring people into compliance. Secondly, if you decide to make these regulations more strict than the model rules, then you will be the leader in litigation because someone will challenge your enforcement as arbitrary and capricious, and that standard will be tested, and so won't the Board of Selectmen's budget for litigation. So while it might be in the best interest of some lawyers to initiate litigation, in this case, it directly affects the budget and it directly affects the selectmen and finance committees budget process, because you will have litigation and you will have to prepare for it. And as a leader, you will be the one that has to take it to the goal line. So exceeding the regulations, while it has upside of being the leader and bringing remedial compliance, it has a downside in the fact that the citizenry will be suffering and funding litigation that may necessarily not be in the best interest or be successful in that manner.
Yeah, I'm not trying to look at things being stricter than the state. I'm just trying to bring us up on par with what the state has.
Well,
Yeah,
again,
and just so
I think you're right. Bringing it up on par also has some exposure, but not the exposure of exceeding the regulation. You still may get challenges by adopting this model code of what the state has promulgated. No one has challenged maybe any of this, but it's not certainly been tested because no one's really adopted it. And I think adopting this as the first community puts you at risk of someone challenging it. And challenging a regulation is a long, arduous process and comes to the conclusion whether or not what was passed was arbitrary, and the purpose of it being passed can be challenged.
Yeah.
So again, that goes back to this revenue raising and the fines associated with this. If there's a regulatory fine that the state wants to impose, I think that's something that the state can do. But once you look to the local Board of Health, we have a local regulation, and Ray mentioned it was 1991, but it allows us to stop issuing a permit. That is probably the most powerful thing that we have in our arsenal, is that you just don't renew unless you pay the fine. If we have to wait 364 days, we wait the 364 days. And it might even be better that the fine could be modified to include a multiplier if it did go beyond reasonable times to pay it. So again, I think those thoughts need to be considered. I'm certainly not one that would think that litigation should ensue over these types of violations when in fact they're remedial. We need to bring these businesses into compliance. We're not here to penalize them unless the penalty is statutorily imposed or regulatory imposed by the state. It can be enforced. But for the Board of Health to start enforcing those state regulations, we run the risk. There's going to be a challenge, and our town runs the risk that we're going to have to defend that lawsuit. So I'd leave it at that.
Yeah, I appreciate your insight, because I'll definitely go with this to town council, because I don't want us being on the bleeding edge of something. And
Yeah, you're bringing up some good points. The section on enforcement in 105 CMR 665 is 0.055, which is labeled enforcement. It's lengthy, but generally what it indicates is the general procedure. It says, unless otherwise expressly provided in any general law to the contrary, each Board of Health may enforce 105 CMR 665 or otherwise at law or in equity in the same manner that the local rules and regulations are enforced. And then there's an interesting provision after that in subsection D of the same section that says whenever any Board of Health has failed after a reasonable length of time to enforce 105 CMR 665, the Commissioner of Public Health of the Commonwealth may act for the Commonwealth in any way that the local Board of Health is authorized to act to effect compliance. So the enforcement section of this, as Susan knows, our focus has been on education because of the ominous expansion of the amount of the fines and such like that. It's our job to get everyone in compliance, lest somebody from the state come into the store and issue such a fine. This is why the Tewksbury led on this. And Susan, it was in the summer, right? Was it July, August, something like that? That all those statements were signed. So we really felt it was important that they knew.
Time has gone by. I can't recall when that was.
Yeah, summer's been a bit of a blur.
But Bob, really great points, and I think maybe discussion can come to a close this evening. So we're at 7:45 now, and maybe we can I don't know, think about this. There is no rush. It's not because I'm exiting. So if it's not simple, it's not simple. It's not a problem. So just trying to discuss these things, and there are great issues. And Mr. Chairman, I'd love to see the conversation, wind down so we can finish tonight in a 2-hour time limit. So.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Just me. Sorry, it's a long day.
That's fine, because there's.
Can I take 30 seconds more?
Go right ahead.
I just want to say, and I didn't know until you had mentioned it, in terms of, I should have assumed it, but I never like to assume. I just want to say that working with Sue Sawyer has been a tremendous pleasure in my professional life. I can't tell you how appreciative I am of her professionalism, patience, just her ability to organize so many things at one time, especially in light of what's going on now. I feel I am honored to have worked with you, Susan, and you're going to be missed very, very much. I wanted to just say that.
We're not trying to get you to change your opinion or your decision.
Thank you, Ron. You know that it's mutual.
Thanks, Susan.
So how do we close this from here, Mr. Chairman, tonight?
I think the next step is that I'll need to have a conversation with town council and just, and maybe Bob, it'd be best for you and I to have the conversation with Kevin Feely and just gauge where he feels it, whether we should take this on upon now or wait for some other community to be the test case.
Well, I think it's incumbent upon us as a board, and even if we have to break into a subcommittee to do this, to look at the exposure that we invite if we decide to be the lead. And I don't think it's all entirely within our purview to say that we want to adopt this because we want to be in the lead. I think we want to adopt this because it is enforceable and it's reasonably enforceable,
Right.
and that we're not acting in a manner that's punitive, but remedial and educate. So I'll leave it at that, and I hope the chairman does establish that subcommittee and have the discussion on the exposure level.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, Ron, as always, thank you very much. It's been a very enlightening and educational time with you here tonight.
Very welcome. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. May I ask Bob one question?
Go right ahead.
No, Bob, I agree with everything you were saying, but I was wondering from a challenge point, since the state did promulgate those rules and people had plenty of time to challenge them before they were promulgated, even though they may have not chose to go do that, doesn't that give us a little bit of a benefit regardless of which way we go? I do agree what you were saying, but doesn't that give us a little bit of insulation because a precedent was already set for those rules, and basically we're just in alignment so that it would maybe minimize litigation we might be dealing with?
Well, I agree with the question you're asking, Tony, but I think the question is more geared to when a regulation is passed and there's a public comment period. That's the due process part of the process, and people get to comment on the regulations. Sometimes negative comments don't matter and it gets passed. That doesn't mean that anybody that you try to enforce it on doesn't have the ability to go to court, because they always do.
I understand.
Anyone can file a complaint for any reason, including a declaratory judgment, to determine whether or not these regulations are reasonable, or reasonable as enforced, or reasonable as enforced based on the facts. So I think the exposure is protracted litigation at a great cost because people can do it.
Well, it definitely made sense what you were saying, and I agree. I was just hoping that even though there is that potential, because I knew people may file a frivolous lawsuit or a lawsuit that has potential to get protracted, I thought that since they did have that due process where people were supposed to, be involved with the law, and I know it can be changed after it's promulgated, but I thought it might have, regardless of who the first town is. It's always troubling to be the first one to do something, but as you said, we do have a duty to look into this, and but you made it pretty clear on that, so I thank you for that clarification, because it does make sense what you said. They can wait,
and the last thing I would address to Tony is, yes, there's a presumption that the regulation is valid because it was promulgated and passed. That doesn't mean that a superior court or an appeals court could rule that it overstepped its purpose. So that'll be how I
Correct.
leave it off. And thank you very much.
No, thank you, Bob. Thanks for the clarification. Great to have a legal mind there, but yeah, exactly. So sounds great. Thank you.
Well, again,
And
thank you, Ron, for joining us tonight.
You're very
Thank you,
welcome.
Ron.
Have a great night.
You too.
All right. So, director reports. So, what's this COVID that I see in the director report? Is that something new?
And you may have noticed that Irvi has joined us now. She's been very patient sitting at home. I wanted to bring Irvi on today because I want to let you know that working with Richard over the last week or two or three, that we have arranged to bring on 2 or 3 additional part-time COVID-only nurses or assistants to help with the tracing. And to preface that, I just want to remind you or look back to our October meeting. I think I might have stated that there were about 12 cases in October. And then October 30th, active cases were 16. November 6th, the active cases were 36. The 13th, they were 89. And today's number is 137. Irvi is extremely overworked right now. And Richard Montori, our town manager, has stepped up with the COVID funding that is allowed to hire a couple of nurses and a non-nurse to assist with the tracing right now. So I just wanted to let you know that it's inactive, active right now. They haven't started, but this is what's going on right now. It's moving quickly, and hopefully they'll start quickly, and hopefully it'll be over quickly, but we don't know that for sure, and we can't keep up right now. So any comments, Irvi, on how are you doing? I guess that's the question.
I'm hanging in there. It was definitely quite a jump between, I don't remember the exact dates that you said, between those 2 weeks where the numbers essentially doubled. I have been sending cases to the Community Tracing Collaborative because I've had to. I don't prefer to do that. I'd like to keep the cases in-house because, unfortunately, they don't care about our residents how we do. There are cases that should be closed that are not closed out in a timely manner. I get a lot of them that say that the case was never reached or lost to follow up, and that doesn't really help us. And there's also a lot of backtracking on my end to check in with them to say, hey, what's going on with these cases? It just adds on, steps that I feel like if we could be doing in-house, that would definitely be optimal, which is why we chose to bring in a couple of more health professionals to help us. It's been crazy.
Yeah, it has. And not only just local cases, is also just the businesses in the community have been impacted. So a server or an employee from another community who works in our community, it's our obligation to work with that business owner to try and identify the contacts. And I think Irvi will tell you, 2 months ago, a person had 2, 3, 4 contacts, and now it's 9, 10, 11 contacts. And then there's the sports, and I don't even want to go there, but the sports teams have created a contact, I don't know, stew of some sort that there's just so many of them, and they cross over each other, and it's just very difficult to keep up. So, the priority obviously are the positive cases. We're trying to address those immediately as possible, get them isolated, get them the information, and then get to the contacts as well. It's a task that, 2 months, literally 1 month ago, was 12. So I'm just just letting you know that we're getting extreme support right now from Town Manager Montori, but it does take a little bit to get people up and running. So it just happened quickly, that's all. So we hope that it won't be long-term. Obviously, we're optimistic about the future and, vaccines and moving forward into 2021. But right now, the way the rules are and the laws are, our local response needs some assistance. So I just want to let you know that we are getting support.
And I think the other thing that you've shared with me too is that the governor had reduced the staffing of CTC over the summer as everything started trending down.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's a sudden spike and they cannot hire people fast enough. So it's incumbent or falls upon the communities to fill that gap.
I'm glad you mentioned that because they actually said, unless you are a very high community, they're barely, responding to the cases. They just don't have the ability. They are hiring every day and they're training every day. Sorry.
Yeah, that was the other piece actually that I was going to mention about the CTC is like, sometimes just through contacts or whatever, we'll call a case. And, through the investigation, I don't know, however it comes about, like, oh, my family members also tested positive. Then you go back and you look at the name, you find it in the database, and this person has not been contacted by the CTC yet. And it's like way overdue because the CTC is so behind.
Yeah.
So, there's multiple days of delay just due to the sheer volume of cases that are going into the CTC. So I really do feel like that if we had the resources in-house, that we could do a better job of catching those people on time, getting them out of circulation and quarantining the contacts. So that was another point that I had actually wanted to bring up.
Thank you. Okay. So any questions regarding that? I just wanted to make sure you guys were up to speed. It really happened quickly this week that a couple of opportunities came to us of people, one who actually has CTC training, another person who's already actually on the virtual network, which is great, and then another who is going to be training to get there. So good opportunities that just came upon us. I think good things happen at the moment you need them the most. And I think we needed it the most this week. Any questions?
So, Hervey, given everything that's happening, is there anything that you could provide, and as I'm catching you off guard in this, where Thanksgiving is next week and we have other big holidays coming up, anything that people should keep in mind as we're coming up to these holidays, things that they can do to keep gathering safe?
Absolutely. The first thing is be picky about who you're going to spend your holiday with. Keep it small. It's not part of our culture to wear masks when we're around other people, but I think that is a really strong risk reduction tool. So as awkward as it may be, if you're going to have another family at your house for Thanksgiving or you're going somewhere else, try to wear a mask as long as you can. Obviously when you're eating, you're not going to be able to wear a mask, but like I said, I just feel like there's a lot of almost peer pressure, to be well, should I be wearing a mask? They're not wearing a mask, because there's just that. I feel like there's that sense of peer pressure really is the best way that I can describe it. So, I'm not saying that we want to wear a mask forever and we want to make it normal, but right now, looking at the numbers and how we're doing, we need to reduce risk as much as possible. So keep your gatherings small. I know the governor's talked about doing virtual get-togethers, wash your hands, the same stuff, physical distance, and don't let your guard down. That's the biggest thing. We're not out of this yet. Don't let your guard down because we still have Thanksgiving, we have the Jewish holidays, we have Christmas, we have New Year's, and if we can learn anything from what Halloween was, where I don't necessarily know that Halloween has contributed to the spike, but I can tell you that
You
I can
know
tell you
it.
that currently I have 32 people between the ages of 20 and 29 that have tested positive for COVID. So, you know, that I'm speculating a little bit, but I would bet that Halloween had something to do with it.
Well, the next will be if dentists start getting it from all the kids eating all the candy and getting cavities. So that'll be the next test. So Tony, you can keep us in the loop on that.
So the other part, of course, is the enforcement part, and Shannon and I are doing our best to respond to the complaints as they come in. The governor's rules now are very tight. As you know, everyone is supposed to be wearing a mask pretty much all the time when they're outside and all the time when they're inside. So people are calling us constantly, wanting to know, you know, or wanting to complain about whether the person where they got their new tires, their new muffler, where the store, at their house. We are not going out unless there is a complaint, and generally we make a phone call first and follow it up. But we are looking for some support from Richard with that as well, to be honest. It is difficult, and I know a lot of other communities are sending people out to businesses to help them with compliance. We don't really have enough people to do that, so we do our best with what we have. So it is hopeful that maybe someone will help us with that. So there are a lot of rules, and unfortunately, this is what they are. So when we get a complaint, we follow up, and we follow them the way the governor has indicated. But we're not out watching people leave their houses at 9:30 at night, which is what is the rule. So if anyone's wondering, I'm not out there doing that, but we will follow up on things that we are you know, called about. So we have enforcement and we have follow-up. There's two huge different parallel at the same time, going on at the same time. So taken up by the few of us that are there.
And on the enforcement side, it's more the first option is education, correct? As opposed to slapping a fine on them?
It is. That's always been our approach. And it just hasn't changed. That's how we're doing it. Whether or not other communities are doing it differently, that's just how Tewksbury is doing it.
Yeah, you've shared that other communities, Cambridge being one, will have sort of, I think, face mask ambassadors or something similar to that, where they're going out and trying to spread the knowledge as opposed to.
We don't really, you know, we don't have this downtown atmosphere type place where, you know, casually we're different. Tewksbury is unique, as every community in the town of Massachusetts.
Well, thank you for all your efforts, Irving. I know you probably seem like you're in the background a lot and your efforts go unappreciated, but we definitely appreciate what you've been doing and all the hours you've been putting in.
Thank you.
Any questions from members or anything for Irvi while she's here, and then we can let her go?
I only had one question regarding the weather over Thanksgiving, and I think Irvi could probably address this better than me, but it appears that there is a great opportunity to keep the windows open, utilize the exterior as part of your gatherings, and try to keep the fresh air around you as much as you can.
Yeah, fresh air is definitely, and air circulation is definitely a big part of risk reduction as well. You know, we do talk about that a lot with people. Open your windows when you can, like on the nice days, like tomorrow is supposed to be really warm. You know, go around your house and open your windows and just let it air out.
Excellent.
And I think the last thing we had tonight was just you had put together the schedule of meetings for next year.
Yeah, that, and I just want to let you know prior to that, just, you know, we are in the midst of renewal time, and let you know Lisa's working very hard on the permit renewals, of course. And as you know, the current way we do it now is if you're in the food permit, you're supposed to renew 30 days prior to expiration. We've had 76 renew, and we have 70 still waiting. So it's the 19th, and they're due by, I think it's December 1st or the 30th. Your new rules are that they will be doubled in fee after the 30th, and after January 1st, they will be subject to closure. So there won't be an incremental increase like we used to do. So our new thing is just double the fee. So if you pay 400, you pay 800. But if you don't pay by and renew by December 31st, you can be subject to closure on January 2nd. So body arts, tobacco, ice rink, and food are due right now. So now we can move on to the meetings.
Oh, actually, one thing just to add to that as
Yeah.
clarification is in prior years, you folks have bent over backwards to send out frequent and constant reminders to any permit holder that had not renewed to ensure that they renewed before the end of the year. And for obvious reasons, you folks can't even consider doing that this year because you're focused on COVID and everything else.
Oh, up until now, it's been normal. She sent out the initial, she sent out reminders. She's tried to identify any food people or any permit holders who may not realize maybe someone moved on in the position. So she's reached out to them, but I've told her, it's okay. You don't have to chase people on November 27th. This is their obligation. And hopefully they're just waiting till the last second and it'll go smoother. This is the 5th year since, or is it 4th since I came? So, it's their obligation. It's a food permit. What can I say? So.
Okay, so meeting dates.
Yes. Any issues with those?
I have none myself, and I'm assuming you have no issue with the sole meeting that you'll be attending next year.
I do not.
I don't have any objections.
And I don't believe any of these fall on any holidays.
I'm going to abstain because I actually haven't reviewed my calendar to determine whether there's any conflict.
That's okay.
So people feel like they've reviewed enough, except for Bob, that you're willing to vote to approve these tonight or defer this till next meeting?
I think we can approve them.
Okay.
I'm okay with it too.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, you want to state that in the motion then, Maria?
I will put forth a motion to accept the calendar dates of meetings for 2021.
Okay, who'd like to second that?
I'll second it.
Okay, Tony has seconded it. So motion's been put forth and second to approve the Board of Health meeting schedule for 2021. We'll take a roll call vote. So Maria Zaroulis.
Aye.
Charlie Rue.
Aye.
Tony Bichetti.
Aye.
And Bob Scrona, you're abstaining, correct?
Abstain.
Okay. And chair votes aye, so the motion carries 4-0 with 1 abstention. Okay. Anything else, Susan, tonight before it's Charlie's turn?
No, nothing else this evening, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Well, and I just want to thank you as well, besides everything that
We're
Ron
done
mentioned.
yet, so you don't have to thank me.
Oh, no. But you and Irv and Shannon and Lisa have been doing yeoman's work these last couple of weeks, especially with the uptick and everything. And I just wanted to say everyone's efforts have not gone unnoticed. So we thank you all for dealing with the sudden influx.
I will pass that on to Shannon and to Lisa as well, because she takes a lot of the phone calls and is very great with communicating, as best she can, and the rules and how things are, and then of course passes it on to us.
Yeah, and I've heard some of those when I've been on the phone with you of not everyone is pleasant, unfortunately. So, Charlie, I think it's your turn for your monthly motion.
Mr. Chairman, it is with great pleasure that I'd make a motion to close tonight's meeting.
And who would like to second that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, so Bob has seconded. So motion's been put forth and second to adjourn tonight's meeting. We'll take a roll call vote. So Bob Scarano,
Yay.
Maria Zaroulis,
Yay.
Dr. Bichetti,
Yay.
Mr. Rue.
Yay.
Chair votes aye as well. So the motion carries unanimously 5-0. So it is 8:11 p.m. Good night, Tewksbury.